I'm Marin Whitcomb, 46, a Rear Admiral in the United States Navy and the incoming Commodore of Destroyer Squadron 22. For 24 years, I gave this Navy every promotion board, every underway, every wardroom that did not yet believe I belonged in it. But when a captain in my own squadron grabbed me by the collar in a bar in Annapolis on the Friday night of Memorial Day weekend, not knowing who I was, I made a quiet choice that ended his career and changed everything. Have you ever been the woman in the room nobody yet knew was in charge? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You are not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you are tuning in from. And if you have ever had to stand up for yourself in a room that thought you were nobody, hit that like button and subscribe. It was October of 1986, and my mother had me bundled into a pea coat 2 sizes too big for me on the pier at Naval Station Norfolk. We had been standing there for 40 minutes. I was 6 years old. The wind off the Chesapeake was the kind of wind that gets up under your collar and stays there. And I remember thinking that I was not going to ask to go back to the car because I could see in the line of my mother's mouth that we were not going back to the car. The pier smelled like fuel oil and coffee. The pier always smelled like fuel oil and coffee. 40 years later, on a Tuesday morning at the Squadron building in Norfolk, I would walk past a pot of coffee in a chief's mess and be 6 years old for a second, because the brain keeps the smells. The destroyer came in slow. She was a Spruance class, my father's first major command, and she had been 6 weeks underway in the North Atlantic on a winter cycle that nobody on the pier was talking about. My mother held my hand. She did not let go of my hand until she saw my father's cover come down the brow. Then she let go of my hand, very carefully, the way you put down a glass you do not want to spill, and she walked 4 steps forward and stopped, because she was a Navy wife, and Navy wives at homecomings do not run. "Wave to him, Marin," she said. She did not look down at me when she said it. "He can see you. He can always see you." I waved. He saw. He brought a hand up to the brim of his cover, and then dropped it, and crossed the brow and came down the pier toward us at the same Navy officer pace. He came down every pier he ever came down in 36 years of commissioned service. He hugged my mother first. He always hugged my mother first. Then he picked me up off the planks of the pier with one arm and held me against the rough wool of his bridge coat, and he said, into my hair, "I came home, Marin. I always come home." He came home 30 more times in my childhood. I learned to count the ships. I learned the names of all of them by the time I was 9. I learned what fuel oil and coffee meant. I learned what a Navy wife was by watching my mother, and I learned what a Navy officer was by watching my father, and I learned that the line between those two things was the line I was going to have to decide which side of in my own time, on my own terms, without anybody pushing me. The summer I was 11, my father was selected for flag rank. He had been a captain for 6 years. The selection came down in a personal call from the Chief of Naval Operations on a Thursday morning in June of 1991, while my mother was making lemonade in the kitchen and I was on the back porch with my book. He came outside and he sat down on the porch swing next to me and he said, "Marin, I am going to be a Rear Admiral." He said it the way other fathers say, "I am going to fix the dishwasher this weekend." Quiet, not a big production. Just a thing he was going to do. He took me down to Annapolis the next month on the way to Newport for War College. We stopped for one day. He walked me along the Severn River seawall, the long curve that runs from the seawall gate down past the Academy Chapel, and he told me about the yard. He told me about the boats. He told me about Memorial Hall on the 2nd deck of Bancroft, the room where they keep the names of every Academy graduate killed in combat. He did not tell me he wanted me to go there. He did not tell me he wanted me to be a surface warfare officer. He told me, looking out at the water, that the Academy was a place, and he hoped it would be my place, and that the only way he had ever seen this work was when the person decided it for themselves. "I will not tell you to apply, Marin," he said. "I will tell you to ask yourself a question. If the answer is yes, the answer was already yes." I did not say anything back. I did not need to. My father had a way of saying serious things while he watched the water. He did not look at you when he said them. He said them out to the river and trusted you to catch them. I caught them. By December of 1995, I was 15, and my father had been pinned to Rear Admiral, upper half, 2 stars, with a major command afloat. The 4 shoulder boards my mother framed for him hung in the front hall of the Norfolk house above the bench where he left his cover. I was at the kitchen table with my algebra homework. He was at the counter making coffee in PT shorts and a faded blue sweatshirt that said Navy across the chest. He asked me quietly whether I had thought about Annapolis. I told him I thought about it every day. He said good. He said he would not push. He said I had to decide it for myself because it was the only way it lasted. There is a particular kind of woman who belongs at sea, Marin, he said. You will meet her in yourself someday. Do not be afraid of her. I was 17 the summer my mother drove me up to Annapolis for an academy open house. My father was at sea. We ate lunch at a crab house on the harbor, and we walked the yard in the afternoon sun, and we stopped in front of Bancroft Hall, and my mother said very quietly that she had been waiting for that day since the day I was born. I did not ask her what she meant. My mother had been a Navy wife for 22 years by the summer I started thinking about Annapolis. She knew before I did that this was going to be the last summer of the version of me that had not decided yet. I watched a small group of plebes run out of the wide doors of the hall and into the afternoon, and I thought for the first time in a complete sentence. I am going to come here. I came there. I went through the gate on induction day in July of 1998, 18 years old, with a duffel bag and the same composed expression I have been wearing in rooms full of men in uniform ever since. My father was at sea. My mother was on the other side of the rope line. The Marine captain at the gate took one look at my name tape and asked me with great cheerfulness whether I was Vice Admiral Caldwell's daughter. He said it the way you tell a child she has nice eyes. He said he would be watching me closely. He meant it as encouragement. I heard it, in the first inch of a 30-year measurement, as the first thing I was going to spend 28 years walking out from under. Caldwell, he said. Admiral's daughter, yes? We will be watching you closely, midshipman. I told him I was looking forward to it, sir. I went through the gate. I did not look back at my mother. I had decided, walking the 4 steps to the rope line, that the only way to walk into the yard as Vice Admiral Caldwell's daughter was to walk in and out of being his daughter on the same step. I was about to be Midshipman Caldwell. I was going to be Midshipman Caldwell on my own terms, or on no terms at all. He thought he was being kind, that Marine captain. I think now that he probably was. But kindness that does not take you seriously on your own terms is its own kind of dismissal. I learned that at 18, and I have never been able to unlearn it. My first ship was USS Stout. I reported aboard in 2003, 23 years old, the most junior officer in the wardroom, the only woman on the engineering side. The deployment was the Eastern Mediterranean, and the work was night and day plant qualification. The senior chief on my division had been in the Navy for 28 years. He had been on 6 ships. He was a man who, when he stood at parade rest, made the deck plates look smaller. He came up to me 3 days before the first major plant inspection, and he asked me, with great courtesy, whether I would mind staying out of the engineering plant during the inspection. He said he did not want me to embarrass myself. He said it the way you tell your niece not to drive in the snow. I looked at him. I had been on the ship for 9 weeks. I had qualified at every watch station I was eligible to qualify at. I had stood the engineering officer of the watch 3 times. I told him, with composure, that I would be in the plant for the inspection. I told him I would appreciate his expertise on the deck plates with me. I told him I was the divisional officer and that the inspection report would have my signature on it. He raised an eyebrow. He did not say anything. He went back to work. I passed the inspection. He never said that sentence to me again. 12 years later, he sent me a Christmas card the week I took command of USS McFall, with a note on it that said only, Captain, proud, go. I keep that card in my desk drawer in every office I have had since. I keep it there because there are men who learn and there are men who do not. And the chief in the engineering plant on USS Stout learned the way men learn when a woman does not react the way they expected. He learned by watching. I went to department head school in Newport in 2006, 26 years old. There were 38 officers in the class, 6 of us were women. At the welcome reception on the first night, a lieutenant commander walked across the room to me with a drink in his hand and asked me with great cheerfulness which one of the students I was married to. I told him I was not married to a student. He laughed, the way you laugh when you have not yet realized the joke is not the joke you thought. And he asked me again, more slowly, as though I had not understood. I told him, more slowly, that I was one of the students. He blushed, he apologized, he retreated. Across the room, I watched him cross the floor to another woman in the class and ask her the same question. I was standing alone with my drink at the window. Across the room, a tall lieutenant commander in submarine dolphins watched the whole exchange. He had set his drink down on the bar. He was looking at me the way an officer looks at another officer who has just absorbed an artillery round and not flinched. That was Linus Whitcomb. He waited about 90 seconds. Then he walked over. "Lieutenant," he said. "I am Linus Whitcomb. I am with the submarine class. I would like to apologize on behalf of my entire wardroom for whatever that man just said to you. Although in the interest of full disclosure, I do not know him and I do not know what he said, so my apology is provisional." I laughed. I had not laughed in 3 months. He stayed at the window for the rest of the reception. We were married in 2008 in a small ceremony at the Naval Academy chapel, with my mother in the second pew and my father in dress whites at the back of the room. I took his last name 3 years later, in 2011, after our second underway together had taught both of us that the names did not actually matter. And the only reason I had not changed it was that I was afraid changing it would somehow change me. It did not. I changed it. I am Marin Whitcomb. I am Marin Caldwell, too, in my father's house and on the wall of plaques at every wardroom I have ever served in. The Navy keeps both names. The Navy is good at that. The condescension did not stop. The condescension never stops. It only changes shape. In 2009, 29 years old, I was the operations officer on a destroyer in the Eastern Pacific. And a visiting Commodore came aboard for an underway brief and addressed the tactical action officer brief 4 times in 20 minutes as gentleman. The CO of the ship, a commander I trusted, corrected him quietly between slides. The Commodore looked at me, said, "Oh, said my apologies, Lieutenant," and continued. He used the word gentleman again on the next slide. I gave the brief without flinching. I was recommended for early promotion on the fitness report from that tour. If you wait for the room to stop calling you gentlemen, you will wait forever. You give the brief anyway. The brief is the point. The room learns by watching the brief land. I learned to give the brief. I learned to walk into a room of 40 officers and to make the room remember, by the second slide, that I was the briefer. I learned to keep my voice level when the room did not yet know it was supposed to be listening. I learned, by my department head tour, to stop being surprised by the Marine captain at the gate and the lieutenant commander at the reception and the visiting Commodore at the brief. I learned that the only way out was through, and that the through was a particular set of skills that you built one underway at a time, and that the skills were the entire job. The reaction of the room was not the job. The brief was the job. The plant was the job. The ship was the job. The Navy is built on people who understood, by their early 30s, that the reaction of the room is not the job. I made lieutenant commander in 2012. I went back to sea as a department head for the second time on an Arleigh Burke out of Yokosuka. I made commander in 2017 and took command of USS McFall that summer. I had the ship for 2 years. We deployed twice. We came home both times with the entire crew. The senior chief from USS Stout, by then a retired master chief in Norfolk, met me on the pier the morning I took command and shook my hand and said, "Captain, good. The ship is in good hands." I framed nothing. He had said it. I knew it. The ship was in good hands. I made captain in 2021, 41 years old. I went to the Joint Staff at the Pentagon for 2 years. Then to U.S. Fleet Forces Command in Norfolk as Director of Surface Warfare Operations in 2023. Then back to the Pentagon in 2025 as Deputy Director for Surface Warfare Requirements on the OPNAV N9 staff. In January of 2026, the flag selection list came down and my name was on it. Rear Admiral, lower half. 07, the slate read, Commodore, Destroyer Squadron 22, Naval Station, Norfolk. I was 46 years old. I had been on active duty for 24 years. I had commanded a ship and a destroyer squadron staff and a major Pentagon directorate. I called my father from the office on the day the list dropped. He answered on the second ring. He said, "Marin, I have been waiting for this list for 24 years. I am proud of you. Now go to work." I was frocked in early May in a small ceremony in the office of the Chief of Naval Operations at the Pentagon. The CNO pinned the single silver star on the right collar of my service dress blues and then on the left collar, and he said, "Commodore Whitcomb, welcome to the flag mess. Your squadron is in Norfolk. They are expecting you the 1st of next week." Linus was in the office. My mother was in the office. My father, 80 years old, had flown up from Annapolis in his old blue sport coat and his surface warfare lapel pin, and he stood at parade rest the whole time. He did not salute me. He hugged me. He said into my hair the same thing he had said on the pier in 1986. He said, "Marin, I came home." He had been at sea for 36 years, and on the day his daughter pinned to flag rank, he was coming home, the way he had always come home, to me. I reported to Norfolk the first week of May. I took the in-brief from the outgoing Commodore, a captain in his last weeks of active duty before retirement. I sat in his office for 3 days, and I read every readiness package and every personnel evaluation and every casualty report on every ship in Desert 22 for the last year. There were 5 hulls in the squadron. 4 of them were in good shape. The 5th was USS Mahan, a guided missile destroyer that had been in the squadron for 11 years. The CO of USS Mahan was a captain named Garrison Pell. He had been in command for 14 months. There were 2 counseling letters in his file from the last quarter, one for an inspection slip and one for a port visit incident in Naples. The outgoing Commodore tapped the second letter with his pen and said, very quietly, "Marin, I would have given Pell another 6 weeks. You will have to make the call yourself." The Naval Academy Alumni Weekend fell on Memorial Day weekend that year. The class of 2002 was holding its 24-year reunion. I had been planning to go since January. Linus drove up with me on the Friday afternoon. We checked into the Westin on Park Place. The reception was in Mahan Hall at 1800 hours. I wore a navy dress with no insignia. Nobody at the reception, in the rotation of old classmates and college sweethearts and 100 handshakes, asked me about my new star because nobody at the reception knew about it yet. The selection list does not travel at the speed of an alumni weekend. By Sunday morning, the alumni magazine would have me on the late-breaking page. By Friday night, I was still just Marin Caldwell to most of the people in the room, and that was on a night where I had been wearing a star for 3 weeks, the most restful 3 hours I had spent in a month. At 2040 hours, I told Linus I was going to walk down to McGarvey's for a drink. He was deep in a conversation with an old submariner classmate at the bar in Mahan Hall. He said, "I will catch up with you in an hour. Order me a beer." I kissed his cheek. I walked out of Mahan Hall, past the chapel, through the gate at the corner of King George and Maryland Avenue, and down the 4 blocks of King George to State Circle. I had walked that route 1,000 times in my academy years. The streetlights were the same. The brick was the same. The smell of the brackish water off the Spa Creek was the same. I crossed State Circle. I went into McGarvey's saloon. The place was full, but not crowded. Boyd Kerrigan, the retired Master Chief boatswain's mate who had owned the saloon since 1997, recognized me from behind the bar. He came around the bar and walked me to the small back booth without making me ask. He poured me a draft. He did not put a check down on the table. He said, "First one is on me, Captain. Glad you are home. You let me know when you want a refill." He did not know about the star yet. He would find out by morning. Boyd Kerrigan had been pouring my class a draft since I was a plebe in 2001. He had retired off a guided missile cruiser in 1996 and bought the place from a Marine pilot the next year. He knew every officer in the squadron without ever having served a day in any of them. I took the booth. I sat with my back to the wall. I drank the first half of the draft. 20 feet away at the bar, Captain Garrison Pell was on his 4th bourbon. I did not know this at the time. I did not know Garrison Pell. I had never been on his ship. I had read his file 3 times. I knew his counseling letters. I did not know what his face looked like. He, in turn, did not know what my face looked like. He knew my name. He had been told the new Commodore was a 46-year-old female surface warfare officer with a Pentagon background who had been frocked the 1st of May. He had been telling for 2 weeks anyone in his wardroom who would listen that the new Commodore was, in his exact phrase, some Pentagon political flag they shoved on us to clean house. He was using that phrase at the bar at McGarvey's on the Friday night of Memorial Day weekend, 20 feet from me, while I drank a draft Boyd Kerrigan had poured me for free. He was loud. He was talking to a Marine major he barely knew. He used my name. He used it twice. He did not know I was 20 feet away. His Command Master Chief, CMDCM Karsten Luhr, who had driven up from Norfolk for the weekend to see his daughter at the academy, was standing 6 feet behind him with a beer, trying to decide whether tonight was the night to start managing his captain. Luhr would tell me about it 3 weeks later in the chief's mess on Mahon, over a cup of coffee when I asked him. He said, "Ma'am, I could see it coming. I could see it coming the third time he said your name. I should have stepped in. I will live with that." He should not have to live with it. The man who should live with it is the one who set down his bourbon glass on the bar harder than he meant to, and walked the diagonal across the floor to the back booth at 21:25 hours. Luhr had been a boatswain's mate for 19 years and a command master chief for the last 6. He had served under 4 captains on USS Mahon. He had broken in 3 of them. The 4th was Garrison Pell. He had not broken him in. He had tried. He had gone to Pell's cabin in November and asked, with the careful indirection that a command master chief uses with a captain in command of a guided missile destroyer, whether the captain might want to consider easing up at the port calls. Pell had thanked him for his concern and changed the subject. Luhr had gone to him again in February after the Naples incident, and Pell had thanked him for his concern and changed the subject. The third time was going to have to be the conversation that command master chiefs do not want to have. And Luhr had been planning to have it the first Monday after Memorial Day in the captain's cabin with the door shut. He had not gotten the chance. The man he had been planning to have it with was about to make it for him. Across the room, Captain Wynne Brewster walked into McGarvey's at the same moment. Wynne had been my USNA classmate. He had been the 3rd man at my commissioning in 2002. He had been the 2nd man at my wedding in 2008. He saw me in the back booth. He lifted his hand to wave. He saw Pell at the bar. He decided to come over quietly instead of calling across the room. Pell saw the wave. Pell followed it with his eyes. Pell put his glass down. Pell stood up. Pell crossed the floor in 7 steps. He put both hands flat on the table of the back booth, and he leaned over me from the side opposite mine, so that his face was roughly 2 feet from mine in the warm overhead light. Boyd Kerrigan at the taps set a glass down very slowly. Wynne Brewster, 3 booths away, stopped walking. Luhr started moving from the bar. The room volume dropped by half. "What is a civilian doing in our bar?" Pell said. I looked at him. I did not lean back. I said very quietly, "Captain, step back, please." "I asked you a question," he said. "Who are you here with?" "Step back, Captain," I said. "I will not say it again." He reached across the table. He took the lapel of my peacoat in his right fist. He did not punch. He did not shove. He twisted the fabric and he pulled me toward him across the table, 4 inches, until I could smell the bourbon on his breath. My sweater shifted. The small gold surface warfare device on my lapel was hidden under the collar of the peacoat. The bar went silent. Boyd Kerrigan was 2 strides away. Wynne Brewster had stepped between 2 booths and stopped. Luhr was at Pell's elbow. I did not lean back. I did not raise my voice. I looked at him with the same composure I had spent 28 years building in rooms exactly like this one. "Who are you?" he said. I had spent 28 years building a face for the rooms that did not believe I belonged in them. He had bought himself, in 4 drinks and 7 steps across a bar, the version of that face that ended careers. The front door of McGarvey's opened. Commander Reese Tallman, the executive officer of USS Mahon, in civilian clothes, in town for the alumni weekend to see his sister-in-law graduate from a different reunion, walked in. He stopped 2 steps inside the door. He saw his captain across the room with his fist twisted in the lapel of a brunette in a peacoat. He saw the brunette. He recognized my face from the all-hands briefing slides the Surface Force had put out in February. He saw the gold surface warfare device on my lapel as my sweater shifted under Pell's grip. He went very still. He did not yell. He walked 4 steps forward. He planted his feet. He snapped to attention. He said into the silent room, in a voice loud enough that the wood floor seemed to register it. "Commodore." Pell did not move. His hand stayed where it was. "What?" he said. "Commodore Whitcomb, ma'am," Talman said. "I apologize. I did not see you come in." Reese Talman was not the kind of officer who froze. He had been the executive officer on USS Mahan for 14 months. He had been a surface warfare officer for 16 years. He saw it in 2 seconds. He named it in 3. Boyd Kerrigan was one step from the booth, a bar towel in his left hand. Win Brewster had not moved. CMDCM Lower was at Pell's right elbow. The bar was dead silent. I slowly turned my head. I looked at Pell. I said very quietly, "Release me, Captain. Step back from the table." He released me. He stepped back. He did not say a word. I sat in the booth for another 90 seconds without standing up. I let my pulse settle. I had learned on the bridge wing of a destroyer at 0500 hours in the Northern Gulf that the worst thing you can do in the first 90 seconds after a contact is to react. You sit, you watch, you let the contact develop, you think about your next move. I sat, I watched. CMDCM Lower had taken Pell by the elbow and was walking him, quietly, toward the back office, where Boyd would let him sit until a taxi came. Win Brewster slid into the booth across from me. He did not ask if I was okay. He asked if I wanted water. I told him yes. He went to the bar and brought water. "What do you need, Marin?" he said. "I need 3 names," I said. "Yours, Reese Talman's, Boyd Kerrigan's, anyone else who saw it cleanly. 2 witnesses minimum, I would like 3. Win Brewster had been the 3rd man at my commissioning in 2002. He had been the 2nd man at my wedding in 2008. He was the 1st man to ask me in the booth at McGarvey's what I needed. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew. Reese Talman came back from the back office at 2140 hours. He stopped at the booth. He stood at parade rest. He asked the Commodore for permission to speak. I told him to sit down, Commander, and to talk to me like a human being. He sat. He apologized for Pell, then caught himself and said he should not be the one apologizing for Pell. He told me what he saw, in order, from the door. In the words, a surface warfare officer is trained to give a witness statement in. He said he would type it tonight. "Ma'am," he said, "I will write it tonight. I will sign it. I will send it to the Inspector General at Surface Force Atlantic by 0600 hours Tuesday." "Commander," I said, "send it to me first, then to your immediate chain, then to the Inspector General. That is the order." Linus was waiting at the corner of Maryland Avenue and King George at 22:15 hours. He was on the phone with his old submariner classmate. He saw my face. He ended the call mid-sentence. I told him what had happened in 5 sentences. He did not interrupt. He put his hand on the back of my neck for a second, the way he had done since 2007, and let it stay there. "What do you need?" he said. "I need to call Rosa Kettering," I said. "Tonight, before this travels." We walked back to the Westin. I made the call from the desk chair in the room. Vice Admiral Rosa Kettering, Commander Naval Surface Force Atlantic, answered on the 2nd ring. She was at her quarters at Naval Station Norfolk. She listened. She asked 4 questions. She told me to file the contemporaneous note tonight, encrypted, and send a copy to her by 0600 hours, and to do nothing else until Tuesday. She told me she would personally call the office of the Chief of Naval Operations in the morning to put the incident on the official radar, and that she would not let it become a leak before it became a process. She told me that this was not a career-ending event for the Commodore. It was, possibly, one for Captain Pell. "Marin," she said, "you did not have a bad night. You witnessed a captain in my force put his hands on a flag officer in a public bar in Annapolis. There is a difference, and we are going to handle it like there is a difference." Rosa Kettering had been my mentor since I was a lieutenant in 2007. She had been the first 3-star woman to command Surface Force Atlantic. She had a particular voice she used for the conversations that were not about feelings. She used it that night. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed at 23:20 hours with the laptop open in front of me, typing the contemporaneous note in the careful, dated, paragraph-numbered prose I had been trained to type. Linus was asleep in the chair by the window, with his hand still on the arm, The peacoat was on the floor by the closet. The small gold surface warfare device was on the nightstand under the lamp. I wrote the note. I encrypted it. I sent it to Rosa Kettering at 0043 hours. I closed the laptop. I sat with my hands flat on the desk for a minute. I did not cry. I have not cried about it since. I had thought, in the elevator on the way up to the room, that I might call my father. I had thought about it again at the desk in front of the open laptop. I had not called him. I had decided, somewhere between the elevator and the desk, that I was going to make the phone calls a Commodore makes before I made the phone calls a daughter makes. The phone call to Rosa Kettering had been the phone call a Commodore makes. The phone call to my father would have to be the phone call a daughter makes, and there was no version of it I could make on a Friday night in May at 23:20 hours that would not, in its own quiet way, ask him to fix something I had to be seen to fix myself. I let him sleep. I would call him 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, when the institution had finished its part, and the only part left was the part where a daughter calls her father. I drove back to Norfolk on the Monday. The Pentagon called Tuesday morning before I had finished my first cup of coffee. Reese Tallman's signed witness statement was in my inbox, time-stamped 05:47 hours. The third witness statement, from Wynn Brewster, came in at 06:12 hours. Boyd Kerrigan's came in by fax at 06:28 hours. The fax. He still used a fax. Boyd Kerrigan, who had been pouring my class a draft since I was a plebe, sent the Navy a witness statement by fax at 06:28 hours on a Tuesday morning. He had typed it on an electric typewriter. He had signed it. He had dated it. The Navy received it with the respect a witness statement from a retired Master Chief boatswain's mate deserves. The Tuesday morning meeting at Naval Surface Force Atlantic was at 0900 hours in Vice Admiral Kettering's office. I sat across from her. The judge advocate, a Navy captain, was in the second chair. The chief of staff was in the third. Kettering read each statement aloud, in order. She asked me if any element was incorrect. I said no. She nodded to the judge advocate. The judge advocate began drafting the Article 15 referral and the preliminary inquiry. Kettering said quietly that she was also referring it up for a possible relief for cause. "Marin," she said, "I am referring this to the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations as a captain-level event. I am also opening relief for cause coordination with the Inspector General. You will not be the deciding authority on either. You will be the witness. I will be the deciding authority. That is the firewall, and we are going to use it." I went back to my temporary office at Surface Forces. I closed the door. I sat at my desk for 10 minutes. I drank the rest of my coffee. I opened the squadron's training plan for the third quarter, and I started working on it. The training plan needed to be signed by Friday. The training plan did not care that the Commodore had been at McGarvey's on Friday night. The training plan needed to be signed. I signed the training plan. That afternoon at 1400 hours, the outgoing Commodore drove down to USS Mahan with the Article 15 referral in a manila envelope on his knee. He sat across from Captain Pell in the captain's cabin, and he told Pell what was coming. He did not raise his voice. He told Pell to start drafting his statement and to get a lawyer. He told Pell, in the way one surface warfare captain tells another surface warfare captain a thing that cannot be made better with phrasing, what he had done. "Garrison," the outgoing Commodore said, "you are going to want to listen carefully. The thing you did Friday night, the woman in the peacoat, that was Rear Admiral Whitcomb. She has been our incoming Commodore since the 1st of May. Your XO identified her by name in front of 40 witnesses. You put your hand on her lapel. You twisted it. You pulled her across the table. Do you understand what I am telling you?" Pell understood. Pell made a phone call from the back of his cabin at 1500 hours. He told his wife of 19 years what had happened. He told her the outgoing Commodore would later write in his after-action note, in 3 sentences, the truth, without trying to manage it. Beth Pell asked him a question she had been asked before. She asked him whether he had been drinking. He told her yes. She asked him whether he had grabbed the woman. He told her yes. She asked him whether the woman was the new Commodore. He told him yes. She told him she was going to her sister's for the week. She hung up. He sat at his cabin desk on the destroyer in summer khakis with 3 rows of ribbons over his left pocket and looked at the framed photograph of his daughter at her high school graduation in June of last year. The light coming through the porthole at 1540 hours was the same light that had come through it in 2021 the day he took command. He did not move for a long time. The relief for cause process moves at its own pace. The Navy does not relieve a captain in command of a guided missile destroyer overnight. The Navy moves carefully. It builds the file. It builds the inquiry. It reads every witness statement 4 times. It accounts for the fact that a captain in command of a U.S. Navy combatant is a creature the Navy invested 25 years and $40 million in creating, and that the Navy does not undo that investment without being very sure. Mid-June, Vice Admiral Kettering walked into my temporary office at Surface Forces unannounced and shut the door behind her. "Marin," she said, "the preliminary inquiry is in. The captain's Article 15 will be served Thursday. The relief for cause is being signed by the Chief of Naval Operations himself." Pell was relieved in late June in a small ceremony at the quarterdeck of USS Mahan at Berth 45, Naval Station Norfolk. CMDCM Loair stood at attention. The temporary CO, the squadron's deputy commander, read the orders. There were no speeches. Loair saluted Pell on the brow. Pell returned the salute. He walked down the brow alone. He drove off the base in his car. Loair stood on the quarterdeck for another 2 minutes after the car was out of sight, and then very quietly to himself he said, "Sir, take care of yourself." I called my father from my desk at the squadron building that evening. He was 80 years old. He was in his study at the house in Annapolis, with the door open to the back garden. I told him what had happened. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he was silent for 15 seconds. He had not been silent for 15 seconds in a phone call with me since 2002. "Marin," he said, "I have spent 59 years in this Navy. I retired 30 years ago next month. I want you to hear me very clearly. You did not do anything wrong. You did the thing the institution exists for. Now sit in your chair and let the institution finish." "Yes, sir," I said. "And Marin," he said, "I am proud of you. I have been proud of you since the day you walked into Bancroft. I have not always known how to say it. I am saying it now." I sat in my chair for a long time after the call ended. I did not cry. I have not cried about any of this. I sat with my hands flat on the desk, the way I had sat in the hotel room at the Westin at 23:20 hours the Friday of Memorial Day weekend, and I let the call settle. The light in the squadron building windows had gone the color of late June, gold across the parking lot. The pier was visible from my window. Berth 45 was visible from my window. USS Mahan was alongside, taking on stores for an exercise. The Navy was doing what the Navy did. My father, in Annapolis, had said the thing he had not known how to say. I had heard him. I did not need him to say it again. My mother drove down to Norfolk for the weekend after the relief. The two of us sat on the back porch of the rental quarters at Little Creek. She did not bring up the bar. She brought up the day in Annapolis in 1997 when we had walked past Bancroft Hall together. "I was waiting for you to decide, Marin," she said. "I have been waiting for you to decide things since the day you were born. I was right to wait." I sat on the porch with her for another hour without saying anything. The cicadas were loud in the trees. Linus brought out a pitcher of iced tea. My mother poured. She did not ask me whether I was okay. She knew. Trust gets rebuilt, but the rebuilding is not between the Commodore and the captain she did not know. The rebuilding is between the Commodore and the squadron she is about to take command of. The wardroom on every ship in Desert 22 heard the story by Sunday morning, the same morning the Alumni magazine ran my flag selection on the late-breaking page. They formed opinions. I had 6 weeks before my formal change of command. I used them to walk every quarterdeck. I walked Mahan first. Early July, I wore summer service khakis with the single silver star on each collar. Reese Tellman was at the brow. The new acting CO, the squadron's deputy commander, was at his shoulder. I returned Tellman's salute. I walked the ship from bow to stern. I stopped in the chief's mess. I drank a cup of coffee with CMDCM Loair. He did not apologize. I did not ask him to. "Ma'am," he said, "I want you to know I will work for you the way I worked for him, the way I have worked for every captain on this hull since 2018. I will do my job." "Master Chief," I said, "that is exactly what I am asking you to do." I walked 4 more quarterdecks in 4 days. I did not give a speech. I introduced myself to each wardroom. I asked each CO the same 5 questions about readiness. I listened. I made notes by hand. The wardrooms decided by the end of July that I was not in their faces and not over their heads. I was just there. I was the Commodore. I was going to be there for 2 years. They were going to get to know me 1 quarterly readiness review at a time. We were all going to be all right. The 5 questions were the same 5 questions I had been asked by a different Commodore on a different pier in 2012, the morning after my first inspection as a department head. I had written them down on a note card that night. I had carried the note card in my uniform pocket for the next 13 years. By the time I took the watch as a Commodore, the note card was soft at the edges, and the ink had faded on 2 of the lines. I read them off the note card at each quarterdeck. The COs noticed the note card by the 2nd ship. By the 4th ship, the deputy commander of one of the destroyers asked me, in the wardroom over coffee, whether the note card was the one he had heard about. I told him yes. He asked me if he could write the questions down. I told him yes. I read them out to him at his pace. He wrote them down on a fresh note card in his cabin that night. He told me, 2 months later, that he had pulled the note card out at his own quarterly readiness review in front of the senior chief of his deck division, and that the senior chief had asked for a copy. The questions were not the point. The note card was not the point. The point was that the Commodore had stood in the wardroom and asked the questions in the same order the Commodore who had asked her had asked them, 14 years apart, and that the institution had remembered the order, and that the order would still be the order 10 years from now when the deputy commander in his cabin that night was a Commodore himself. The chief of naval operations called me personally in mid-July. He thanked me for handling the incident the way I had. He told me that the new CO of USS Mahan was going to be Captain Idris Vanover, currently the deputy commander of Naval Surface Group 2. He told me Vanover was a friend of his and a friend of the institution, and that I would like him. He told me he would be in Norfolk for the change of command in August. That night, Linus and I sat on the back porch of the rental quarters at Little Creek. He poured me a small glass of red. We did not talk about Pell. We talked about my first 6 weeks. He told me, in the way he had been telling me since 2007, that I was doing the job exactly the way I had imagined doing it when we had sat on the porch of his quarters in Newport in 2006. I told him I was not sure I had imagined it. He told me I had, and he had been there. "You said it out loud once, Marin," he said. "You said, when I do this job, I am going to do it without raising my voice." I remembered. The cicadas were loud in the trees. The small glass of red was half full on the railing. His hand was in mine, the way it had been on every porch we had lived on for almost 2 decades. The first day, I formally took the watch at the Desran. 22 quarterdeck was a Monday in mid-July. The change of command was 6 weeks out, but the responsibility was mine as of that morning. Captain Vanover was scheduled to walk aboard USS Mahan as the new CO the same day. I was up at 0430 hours in the kitchen of the rental quarters at Little Creek in PT gear, drinking the first cup of coffee. Linus came in. He sat across from me. He poured his own cup. He did not say anything for a while. He said, finally, that he would drive me to the squadron building if I would like. I said yes. "I will drop you at the front," he said. "I will come back at 1700 hours. I love you, Marin." I arrived at the squadron building at 0645 hours. The squadron's command master chief was at the watch desk. He called the office to attention. "Attention on deck," he said. "Commodore on deck." I had walked through 1,000 quarterdecks in my career. The first one I had walked through as a Commodore was a small office building at Naval Station Norfolk with 11 people inside it and no ceremony at all. It was the most ordinary morning of my professional life. It was also the morning I had been working for since I was 18 years old. The squadron building had a small senior officer suite at the back. Pell's chair, the one he had used during his unit commander visits, was in the corner. It was empty. It would stay empty for 2 more weeks. I walked past it on my way to my office. I did not stop. I did not turn my head. I did not need to. The institution does not need you to look at the empty chair. The institution needs you to walk past it without flinching and to keep walking. I walked past it. USS Mahan held its change of command at 0900 hours that morning at berth 45. Captain Idris Vanover took command in a small quarterdeck ceremony. Reese Tallman was at parade rest. CMDCM Loair was at the front. Vanover read his orders. He returned the watch. He was, as of 904 hours that morning, the CO of the ship Pell had commanded for 14 months. I was not at the ceremony. I was at my desk 3 buildings over, signing the squadron's quarterly readiness report. By policy, the incoming Commodore does not attend a relief for cause change of command on one of her ships. I followed the policy. I signed the report. I drank my coffee. The morning continued. At 1000 hours, the quarterly readiness package was signed and faxed up to Surface Force Atlantic. The window beside my desk looked out over the pier at berth 45. Captain Vanover's car pulled up to the brow. He got out. He looked once at the ship. He walked up the brow. CMDCM Loair was at the head of the gangway. He saluted. Vanover returned the salute. He stepped aboard. He took the watch. I sat at my desk and I watched it through the window. I drank the second cup of coffee. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I felt the quiet thing that has always come in my career, the morning after a hard decision has finished being made. I felt the small relief of an organization that had done the right thing. I felt the obligation of having a squadron to run. And the obligation came in the same hour as the quiet thing, the way the obligation has always come, in this Navy, in the same hour as the quiet thing. 6 weeks later, on a Sunday morning in early September, Linus and I drove up from Norfolk to my parents' house in Annapolis. My mother was in the kitchen. My father was in the back garden in a faded blue cardigan, deadheading the roses with a pair of clippers my mother had given him for Christmas in 1983. He waved when he saw us. My father had been pruning the roses in that garden for 23 years. He had not let anyone else touch them. He had said, the first summer they moved into the house in 2003, that he had spent 40 years giving orders to people he loved on ships he commanded, and he was going to spend the rest of his life giving orders to plants that would not argue back. We sat at the kitchen table at 1000 hours. My mother had made coffee. The 4 of us sat in the same chairs we had sat in the first summer the family had moved to Norfolk in 1991, and the first summer the family had moved to the house in Annapolis in 2003. My mother did not bring up the bar. She brought up the Commodore selection list from January, which she had framed. I framed the selection list, Marin, she said. The one from January. I have it on the piano. I will leave it on the piano until you make Vice Admiral. I laughed. Linus laughed. My father laughed very softly into his coffee. He had not laughed at my mother's framing of his selection lists for 58 years. He had not minded. He had let her frame them. He had let her leave them on the piano. After lunch, my father and I walked the Severn River seawall, the same seawall we had walked in 1991. He was slower now. He used a cane. He did not need my arm, but I gave it to him anyway. We walked in silence for a while. When he finally spoke, he said it out at the river, the way he had always said serious things. The Navy is the same Navy it was when I commissioned, Marin, he said. It is the same Navy that called my classmates ensigns at the wardroom table in 1967 and made admirals of some of them and broke others of them. It is your Navy now. Take care of it. Take care of the ensigns. Yes, sir, I said. Stop calling me sir on the seawall, Marin, he said. Call me Dad. Yes, Dad, I said. We walked the rest of the seawall in silence. The river was calm. The Academy Chapel was visible across the seawall gate. The plebes of the class of 2030 were in summer khakis on the seawall at the south end of the yard. 4 of them in a small group, with a Marine Company officer giving them a knee-deep tour of the place I had walked into as a plebe in 1998. My father saw them. He did not say anything. He squeezed my arm once. We stopped at the bench halfway down the seawall, the one with the small bronze plaque to the class of 1944. My father sat down. He rested both hands on the head of the cane. He looked at the 4 plebes at the south end of the yard for a long minute without saying anything. He had always done his looking that way. He had always done his thinking that way. He had a face when he was thinking that I had spent 50 years learning the variations of, and the face he had on the bench by the plaque to the class of 1944 was the face he had on the porch swing in Norfolk on the Thursday morning in June of 1991 when he came outside and told my mother he was going to be a rear admiral. It was the quiet face. It was the face that had done the deciding and was waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. He was waiting for the 4 plebes at the south end of the yard to catch up. He was waiting for me to catch up. He was waiting for the Navy to catch up. "You will get the 2nd star, Marin," he said, after a long minute. "Not next year, the year after maybe. You will get the 2nd star. You will get the 3rd star, too. I will probably not be on the porch when you get the 3rd star, but your mother will be. She will frame the selection list. She will put it on the piano. The piano will keep them all, the way the piano kept mine. You let her keep them. The keeping is the part she has earned. The Navy is the part you have earned. Both of us are right, Marin. Both of us have always been right." I sat next to him on the bench. I did not say anything. I had not been able to say anything for a few seconds. He was 80 years old. He had told me, in the quiet voice he had always told me serious things in, that he would probably not be on the porch when I got the 3rd star. I had heard him. I had filed it the way you file a piece of operational information. I sat with him on the bench by the plaque to the class of 1944 for another 5 minutes without saying a word. And we watched the 4 plebes at the south end of the yard, and the river was calm, and the chapel was visible across the gate, and the Marine captain giving the tour was the same Marine captain who had asked me on induction day in 1998 whether I was Vice Admiral Caldwell's daughter. I had not recognized him from across the seawall. He had not recognized me. We had both gotten old. We were both at the yard on a Sunday in early September of 2026, doing the work we had each, in our own way, signed up to do. The yard was the yard. The plebes were the plebes. The river was the river. My father was on the bench beside me. I helped him up. We walked the rest of the way back to the house in Annapolis without saying another word. That evening I walked down to State Circle alone, while Linus stayed at the house to help my mother with dinner. Boyd Kerrigan was behind the bar at McGarvey's. He saw me come in. He poured me a draft without asking. He gave me the back booth, the same back booth, on a Sunday evening with the saloon half empty. He sat across from me for 10 minutes with his own coffee. We did not talk about Pell. We talked about the squadron. We talked about the new CO of Mahan. We talked about the chief who pours the coffee at the squadron building. He told me, when I stood to leave, that he had framed Reese Tallman's witness statement and put it on the wall in the back office. "Commodore," he said, "I framed Tallman's statement. It is on the wall in the back office next to my discharge papers. The boys come back here in 20 years, they will read it." I laughed. I laughed for the first time in 4 months. I paid for my draft. I walked out into the evening on State Circle. The lights were warm behind me. My father's cane was on the porch of the house on Maryland Avenue. Linus and my mother were at the kitchen table. The Navy was 400 miles down the coast on my watch. The small gold surface warfare device was on my lapel under the street lamps as I crossed Maryland Avenue toward home. If you have ever been the woman in the booth, at the back of the bar, in the room that did not yet know who you were, I want you to remember one thing. The bar will know in its own time. You do not have to make it. You only have to be the woman who was always going to be in the booth. The room finds you. The room always finds you. If you have ever been in a room where someone confidently decided who you were and got it confidently wrong, I would love to hear your story in the comments. Did the room find out in its own time, the way mine did? Did you make it find out faster, or did you let the institution finish the work? What did the morning after feel like for you? If this one hit home, hit subscribe. The room finds you. The room always finds you.